So it's pretty apparent to me that a lot of you following me are aspiring guitarists and songwriters, so in this video I want to go over one of the easiest and most practical ways to record your electric guitar. So to start, we're going to need three things, assuming you have an electric guitar and an electric guitar cable. The first is a computer of some sort. Now, I personally recommend a laptop, because the portability is just really nice, even if it's not as powerful as a desktop, but use whatever you have and you'll be fine. The second thing you're going to need is a software to record on. Now, the kind of software you're going to need is called a digital audio workstation, or DAW for short. There's many to choose from, and if you're not sure what to choose, I recommend trying out Mixcraft or Reaper. Installing your DAW of choice should be pretty straightforward, as long as you use a computer somewhat regularly. But if you've got any issues, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to help you out. And the last thing you're going to need is an audio interface. And to grossly summarize what an audio interface is, it's pretty much a glorified sound card that's going to allow you to plug in your guitar and other things directly into your computer. If you don't know what interface to get, I recommend buying a 3rd generation Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. While there's a lot of memes about this interface and just the nature of it, there's a good reason why it's a popular interface, and that's because it works really well for the price point. And I've been using the Scarlett series for a while, so I highly recommend you start on that. Now, if you're a Windows user like me, be sure to install the manufacturer's ASIO drivers when you get the interface. It should be a fairly straightforward process. So now that we've got our computer, all the software that we need, and our audio interface, we're going to want to open up our DAW, create a new project, and set up our audio device appropriately. We're going to want to find preferences and look for sound device or audio device. The name may vary depending on your DAW of choice, but you should be able to find everything. Now, I'm using Mixcraft, and this menu is pretty straightforward. Your DAW may look different, but the principles are going to be the same. So for driver, we're going to want to click on ASIO, and unless you are like me and have a few audio interfaces, you should only be able to choose your audio interface as ASIO device. Apple users, you should be clicking on Core Audio. If I had an Apple computer of some sort, I would be doing a more thorough explanation, but unfortunately, I do not. So my apologies, Mac users. For sample rate, I use 48 kilohertz. If your song ever gets picked up for a video or a movie, the film industry is working in 48 kilohertz as far as sound. It's not a super important detail, but it's something that I like to do. Now, buffer size is pretty important, and we need to talk about this for a bit. In short, the bigger the buffer size, the longer it's going to take for your computer and audio interface to process the audio. And the reverse is true as well. Now, this matters because if you want to hear yourself playing in real time, a big buffer size or a bigger buffer size is going to cause some noticeable delay from when you strum or pluck a note to where you actually hear it in your headphones or speakers or whatever you're monitoring from. And that delay can make it almost impossible to play. So ideally, you want the buffer size to be as small as possible. However, we can't go for the smallest size possible because odds are you're not working on a computer or laptop that is rock solid stability with the best hardware, and when you go for those really small buffer sizes, unless you have a top of the line machine, you're probably going to get some clicks and pops in your audio, and that can ruin the entire recording. So hopefully with that explanation out of the way, I didn't confuse you too much. I personally like to start at a buffer size of 256. We can adjust this later on. That's just a good starting point in my opinion. Once we go over how to record, you can come back to this number and fine tune it based on your computer. Now that our audio device is set up, we can apply these changes and close out this window. So we want to pause from working in our DAW for a minute and focus on the interface itself. We're going to want to plug our guitar directly into the audio interface. That part's pretty obvious. But the other thing we want to make sure we do is make sure that whatever we're plugged into, the input is set to instrument. I'm not going to bore you with the details, just know whenever you're recording the guitar itself directly in the audio interface, you want to make sure the input level is set to instrument. Okay, so back in the DAW. Now, all we need is one audio track, and if you don't see any audio tracks, now is the time to add one. If you've got a bunch of tracks, I personally recommend deleting them all, except one audio track, which is going to be the one we use. We're doing this just to prevent any confusion while you're learning. One track just makes it easier. So we're going to want to name this track. I would just call it guitar. Next, we're going to want to select arm on our track so it's selected to record, but we're also going to need to select the right input from our interface. Whichever input your guitar is plugged into is the input we're going to want to select. We can also add a guitar amp simulator to our track so we're hearing ourselves play through an amp rather than just hearing the dry guitar signal. Now before we hit record, we're going to want to make sure we aren't clipping our input level. I like to make it so the loudest parts of my guitar are hitting at about -6 dB. If your guitar is coming in quieter than that, I would gradually turn up the input on your audio interface until you're hitting about that number. Now we can hit the record button and start playing. I personally like to have countermeasures, so I have some time to get into position before I need to start playing my guitar. After we've played what we needed to play, we're going to want to hit the record button again to stop recording. And there we go, we've recorded our guitar. From here, we're going to want to export this. I recommend just exporting this as a WAV file. I was working in 48 kilohertz, so a WAV file at 48 kilohertz at 16-bit will be perfect. I'm going to select where I want this export to go, and then I'll hit export. We're done. I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to reference this as many times as you need to until everything sinks in. Let me know if you liked the video, give it a like if you did, and leave a comment if you didn't, or if you did. This is the first time I've done a longer form video on how to record guitar, so any feedback would be helpful. If you like these kinds of videos, please consider subscribing. It really does help me out. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next video.